Good? Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us here at the H. Lee Dennison building. I'm joined by a number of my colleagues in office and in law enforcement. I want to thank them for being here, recognize them. Our District Attorney, Tim Sini, Commissioner of the Suffolk County Police Department, Jerry Hard. We also have members of the department here, including our Chief of Department, Stuart Cameron, our First Deputy Commissioner, Jim Skopek, Chief of Operations, Chief McCarthy, Chief of Patrol, Chief Brown, and we're also joined by, and very honored to be joined by my colleague here on Long Island, my county executive to the west, who's doing an absolutely great job, County Executive Laura Curran, and she'll be saying a few words in just a moment. We're also joined by New York State Senator John Brooks, who represents both Nassau and Suffolk County. I'm very happy to have him here today. We're also joined by Lou Savello, Suffolk PBA second vice president, and I want to thank all the members of the PBA, Lou, our PBA president, Noel DiGirolamo, for what they do to protect and promote the interests of our police officers. We're here today to talk about an issue of great importance. We've all seen some very disturbing incidents, disturbing video that has happened in New York City involving attacks on police officers being doused with water, buckets being tossed at police officers, at their heads. These are disturbing images. This is disgusting, disturbing behavior. It is unacceptable behavior. And we're here today, all of us, to make clear that this is unacceptable. An attack on a police officer is an attack on all police officers. And attacks on police officers represent attacks on all of us, on public safety, on the rule of law. It's an attack on the men and women who choose to put on a uniform and go out every single day and potentially put their health, their safety at risk for strangers, for their neighbors, for people they've never met. You know, I was at park dedication yesterday with Commissioner Hart and others as we dedicated a playground at Van Borgendine County Park, which is run and managed by the town of Babylon. And that playground was dedicated to Detective Vygotsky, NYPD, killed in the line of duty in 2011, left behind 4 beautiful daughters. I live right by that park. I live right down the road from another park, Anthony Sanchez, New York City police officer, killed in the line of duty, named for him. I take my kids to that park, take my kids to Van Borgendine Park. And I see these incidents happen, and I see the criticism that seems to so easily flow with respect to the men and women of law enforcement who are out there protecting us each and every day. And I think, you know, I'd love to see some of these individuals take a stroll through my neighborhood, past Anthony Sanchez Park, or by Peter Vygotsky Playground, to understand the risks that these individuals are taking for us every day and the sacrifices that they and their families make on behalf of all of us. And the notion that we would in any way tolerate the idea that it's acceptable to be assaulting officers, to be throwing things at officers in our city, in our state, in our country, it is not tolerable. And we're here to say that we're going to work together to not only declare that, but to put forward legislation that makes sense, that's responsible, and that makes it clear that it's unacceptable. And that's why I thank State Senator John Brooks for being here. There has been legislation, different pieces of legislation that have been put forward in the Assembly and the Senate. I want to thank Senator Jim Gorin as well for a bill that he has sponsored. And I want to thank him and Senator Brooks and our other state representatives for their willingness to listen and to work with us here at the local level, where we're on the ground, where our police officers every day are doing amazing things, to listen to the commissioner and the chiefs, to listen to the PBA and their input, and then to come together and put forward legislation that says enough is enough. This is unacceptable. We do not accept assaults on police officers. That is not who we are. And to do so and to tolerate that in any way would undermine public safety and the rule of law in this community, in our state, and in our country, and we will not allow it. With that, I want to ask my colleagues to come forward and say a few words. I first want to start with my colleague to the west, County Executive Laura Curran. County Executive.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I want to thank County Executive Steve Bellone for inviting me to be here with you today and to join with our Suffolk County counterparts. Thank you, Senator Brooks, for the legislation that you're promoting up in Albany. You know, I feel so many people I've spoken to are so angry when they see these images on TV, when they see these images on social media about police officers getting attacked. I share that anger. Of course, it's dangerous to the officers. It can damage their property. It can impede the work, the very important work that they have to do. And it's also just so disrespectful, incredibly disrespectful. We have to say with one voice that we have no tolerance for these type of attacks, for this type of behavior. So thank you, County Executive Bellone, for bringing this to light, and thank you to all of our police officers, the hard-working men and women of Suffolk, of Nassau, of our entire state, who work every day to keep us safe. It is up to us to protect them so that they can protect us. Thank you.
Thank you, County Executive. And Senator Brooks. Thank you, Senator, for being here, and thank you for your support of our law enforcement officers.
Thank you very much, County Executive Bellone, and thank you all for being here. As you see, we're joined with both county executives, the police commissioner, the district attorney, members of the police force. I think it's very sad that we're here today. This past week, we saw incidents in New York City where water was dumped on police officers. This activity is not okay. In fact, it's a real concern. What's also very troubling is the fact that far too often, in cases like this where there's a video involved, there's often a copycat who will take something and take it to even a further extreme. This kind of activity will not be tolerated and has to stop. We cannot allow first responders and law enforcement officers to have to think about the possibility that they are responding to an incident where someone is going to take some kind of action to make them look foolish or to see how they can find ways to interfere with their response. First responders need to focus on the nature of the call they are responding to, not divert their attention to having to think about the nonsense that we saw this past week. Working with the district attorneys, the police commissioners, the members of the police department, and others, we will be drafting legislation to protect all first responders, police, fire, corrections, sheriffs, emergency medical personnel, addressing the dumping, pouring, spraying, or throwing of any liquid, substance, gel, powder, vapor, or gas on or at any first responder. This law will contain various penalties based on the items used in the incident and the method from which they were delivered or introduced. I would also like to see the legislation address copycat incidents with additional penalties. As I said when I began, it's sad that we're here today, that we have to establish a law to address behavior that we all should understand is unacceptable. It's long past the time that we all learn to respect each other. Those who serve our community, and the first responders in particular, who put their lives on the line day after day, should not be victims of this kind of behavior. Working together, We will develop legislation that addresses all aspects of these kinds of incidents, that establishes penalties that will be both effective and realistic. We will have this legislation introduced before the start of the next session. In closing, we are not looking to overreact to the events of this past week, but rather we are concerned with where these kind of incidents can lead. So we are all clear. We are not here about a bucket of water, but rather the troubling environment that we find ourselves in today. Much of my professional life was spent in risk management, identifying, mitigating, and resolving problems. That's what all of us here and others are going to do collectively with the situations we find us in today. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And I want to ask our district attorney and then our police commissioner to come forward. You know, today in Suffolk County, we have the lowest crime rates in recorded history here. That is not by accident. That is because of the outstanding work of law enforcement. It is great leadership, it is innovative ideas, and it is the men and women of law enforcement out there on the street, again, putting themselves at risk each and every day to keep all of us safe. And I want to thank District Attorney Sini, Commissioner Jerry Hart, all of our law enforcement officers for the work they're doing, and ask the district attorney and then the commissioner to come forward and say a few words. District Attorney?
I want to thank the county executive for bringing us here today and to start this conversation and the work to address this situation. I want to thank Senator Brooks for his insight. Senator Brooks is one of those lawmakers in Albany who make sure that they reach out to stakeholders and folks who are affected by legislation before reacting. And I appreciate the partnership that Senator Brooks has with law enforcement in both Nassau and Suffolk County. So I thank him for his continued partnership. And I want to thank the PBA. They are an absolutely terrific organization that does a lot of the work in the trenches to support our men and women of the Suffolk County Police Department, and I'm proud to stand with them today. You know, what I'm teaching my children, I have an 8-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 3-year-old, and I'm teaching them what I believe, which is when I look at a police officer, I see someone who each and every day risks their lives. They put on that uniform knowing that they may not come home. They make that sacrifice. Their family members make that sacrifice. So when I see individuals who don't seem to share that sentiment and disrespect our law enforcement by assaulting them, I'm extremely disturbed. We need to change this conversation, and we need to do it now. Watching those images, seeing what's going on, is extremely disturbing. It's an assault on those officers, but it's also an assault on law and order. And if you don't appreciate law and order, that's what allows you to wake up every single morning, make your coffee, spend time with your families, go to work, and try to live a happy, healthy, productive life. Without law and order, all of it goes out the window. And it's unfortunate that many people in our society today throughout this country don't seem to remember that. And perhaps it's because we're doing such a good job driving crime down. But all that goes out the window if we don't respect the men and women of law enforcement. So I'll just end on a technical note, since I'm the lawyer in the crowd. Oh, that's right. You're a fake lawyer.
I'm a lawyer too.
You're a real lawyer.
That's true.
So, as Senator Brooks said, we need a comprehensive approach. But one of the things we can do is make sure that people are held accountable for these crimes. There's not a realistic charge today, a felony charge, for someone who assaults a police officer by throwing a bucket of water or another type of liquid onto the officer. You know, research indicates that essentially every single realistic charge is a misdemeanor. So while we need to change the conversation, while we need to continue to build bridges between law enforcement and our communities. We also need that simple common sense step, which is to give prosecutors the tools they need to hold these people accountable for the crimes that they're committing against the brave men and women of law enforcement. Thank you.
Commissioner?
Thank you. And let me begin by thanking the county executive for leading the charge on this imperative issue, as well as Senator Brooks. Thank you for being here. And thank you to everybody who stands here today and law enforcement throughout the region. We stand shoulder to shoulder with our unions, with our county executive, with our district attorney, with the members of the Suffolk County Police Department, and indeed the members of law enforcement throughout the state. We will take every opportunity to ensure the safety of our officers who work every day to ensure the public's safety. I can say that in Suffolk County, the majority of residents were disturbed by what they saw on that video, and they have made their support of our department known, and I thank them for it. We will work hard to continue to strengthen our relationships with all our communities. But make no mistake, there are some that shrug off these disrespectful acts as a mere prank. Some who even applaud this behavior. And unfortunately, some may feel emboldened to think that this is acceptable. Let me be clear. If you think for a moment that we will tolerate this type of disgraceful behavior, think again. Thank you to everybody here, and I applaud your efforts.
And finally, again, I want to thank the Suffolk County PBA, our President Noel DiGirolamo, and all the officers there for the work that they do on behalf of the men and women of law enforcement here. And I want to ask to close us out to have the second Vice President of the PBA, Lou Savello, come forward to say a few words. Lou?
Thank you, Mr. County Executive. My name is Louis Savello, and I'm the second Vice President of the Suffolk County Police Benevolent Association. Recently, videos showing police officers being physically and verbally abused have become YouTube sensations. When I saw them, like many of you, I was shocked, I was disturbed. Seeing police officers doused with water, seeing police officers verbally accosted, and in at least one video, seeing a bucket slammed off the back of the head of a police officer. And even more shocking, seeing all this with absolutely no consequences for the perpetrators. I'm sure my thoughts were similar to many of yours as well. To think that if this is happening to police officers in broad daylight while people are videoing, what's happening to the regular public? How can you feel safe going into New York City? When you strip away a police officer's authority to enforce even the most basic laws, you strip away our ability to protect you, to protect the public. We're here today to make sure that the chaos and the lawlessness in New York City doesn't quite literally spill over here to Long Island. I'm thankful here in Suffolk County we have a partner in the County Executive Ballone. We have a partner in our DA, Tim Sini, and we have partners like Senator Brooks in Albany. This legislation is critical for the safety of not only police officers, but critical for the safety of the public. The Suffolk County PBA and our members fully support efforts to increase the consequences for attacks on police officers of this kind. Thank you.
Thank you, Lou. Thank you very much, Lou. And thank you, everyone, for being here. Any questions? So there are a number of pieces of legislation. Well, let me step back. There's existing laws the district attorney referenced. There are pieces of legislation that have been proposed in various ways. Senator Brooks has a very specific intent in mind with legislation, and what we're saying and what we're thanking Senator Brooks for is the willingness to listen to local officials and the police officials and law enforcement officials on the ground as we come together to craft a single piece of legislation that can move through the state legislature and ultimately be signed by the governor. So we want to see that all come together, and we want to make sure that that input is given, and we know in Senator Brooks, some of our other colleagues, that they are here and very happy to work with us. And we thank him for his leadership on this. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, John. Go ahead.
I think the county executive and the district attorney are exactly right. We have to take a comprehensive look at this. We have to have all the interested parties involved. As you know, some legislation was introduced immediately after this event to make it a felony. One of the things that I see in Albany sometimes is when we're addressing crimes and other activities, the solution is to increase the penalty. Well, that accomplishes nothing. It's time for us to recognize the environment that's been created, pick it apart, make things right. Telling somebody they might go to jail doesn't stop them from doing this nonsense. And as the district attorney said, throwing water on someone, they're not going to jail for 4 years. But unfortunately, when this stuff is videoed and gets out on the internet, people think it's funny. Or people think, hey, how can I top that? We've got to stop that. We've got to get the people to understand and recognize the incredible responsibility the people behind me have in providing public safety. They can't be spending time with this kind of nonsense. We've got to collectively look at what's wrong with the system and the environment we live in and fix it. So what we're proposing is a true comprehensive bill that takes the concerns and the solutions of all of the players involved into consideration so we can effectively address this whole thing. Much of the legislation that's being proposed is good, but let's fix the whole problem this time. And what happened this past week wasn't funny. Nobody got hurt, but people thought it was funny. People thought it was okay. Police officers were embarrassed. There's no excuse for that. That officer soaking wet 5 minutes later could have been rescuing somebody or stopping a violent act. That's what they're about. Not a bucket of water over the head, not a good joke on the internet. It's time we respect the work these folks do and make sure they're working in an environment in which we respect each other and stop some of the actions we've seen. So our objective here collectively is to work together. We've got about 6 months before we go back to session, and I think in that time we can put together a comprehensive practice and bring everybody into the mix. That's our objective. Time to solve the problem. Recognize it, take it apart, and solve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator, and I think that's exactly right. Anyone who has shared this video and thinks it's humorous or funny needs to hear from all of us and everyone who understands what this means, that it's not funny, it's disturbing, it's disgusting, and it's not acceptable. And that's what this is about. Any other questions? Look, I think anything where people believe this is acceptable, where you're hearing that message and that coming out, it is important for all of us, the people who understand, the people in law enforcement, elected officials, to understand and to state very clearly that it is not acceptable. And I will speak for myself, and I know the others will speak for themselves as well.
So this incident happened in New York City. Can you just kind of explain why you as Long Island lawmakers are taking this position?
Well, first of all, we have a number of residents here in Suffolk County. I know the same as in Nassau County who serve in the NYPD. The two officers that I mentioned, Detective Peter Fagaski, Officer Anthony Sanchez, literally who both have parks and streets right around the corner from where I live, named for them, were Suffolk residents who served and gave their life in service to law enforcement and to the NYPD. But more than that, why this is important, because you cannot look at those videos and see what was happening and see the reaction and see how this was shared and not say that this is disturbing, that we have to stand up and speak in one voice and say that attacks like that are the very thing that undermine the rule of law and public safety in a society. And that's why we're up here today. That's why this issue is deadly serious. An attack on any police officer is an attack on all police officers. And the moment that you start to accept that in society is the moment you start to allow crime to come back in and go on the rise again. Thank you.